Thank you, Kene, for that report. We appreciate that. And to discuss the topic, renewed hope, agenda, and the task before the Minister of Labour and Employment, let's welcome Right Honourable Dr. Simon Bako Lalong, the Honourable Minister of Labour and Employment, of course, immediate past Governor of Plateau State. We're glad to have you this morning, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, and good morning, viewers.
All right, and also here in our studio, we have Wale Smart Oyerinde, Director General of the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NECA. We're glad to have you as well, sir.
Thank you for having us. Good morning.
All right. Also with us in the studios is Comrade Peter Esele. He's the former president of the Trade Union Congress, TUC, and also headed the Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria, Pengassan. Comrade Esele, we are glad to have you this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so let's begin the conversation with the Honorable Minister of Labour and Employment. Honorable Minister, you have the benefit of having been a governor of Plateau, so labor matters are not altogether strange to you, as it were. But of course, this is the national level, and obviously you'll be receiving briefings from your various agencies and departments under you. But you kicked off, as it were, with the two-day warning strike backed upon by the NLC. But beyond that, what do you find to be the major concerns with regard to labor and employment in our country today?
Well, let me thank you first for this opportunity, and to say that this is not the first time I've been here discussing about labor relationship. Well, I was met the Minister for Labour and Employment, and I'm sure it was deliberate. Deliberate in the sense that while I was a governor, some of the issues that I had to deal with were issues about the strike, issues concerning especially welfare of workers. And through that, I had a lot of interaction with the Nigerian Labour Congress, the NLC. And so throughout, we were very careful about that kind of relationship. I remember that I was made a member of a committee that recommended 30%, and that 30,000 as a wage. I was a wage increase. I was also a member of the Governors Committee that recommended how we were going to deal with palliatives or not palliatives when we were talking about bailout to each of the various states. Now today, I'm the Minister for Labour and Employment. And don't forget, before I left office, Nigeria Labour Congress gave me an award. I was one of those that received an award for being a labor-friendly governor. So I see the opportunity that we have today, which is also part of the package as put in by our President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, not only a member, but as the Director General of the campaign. So as Director General of the campaign, I knew a lot of issues that the concerns about workers, which we packaged in our renewed hope agenda. And now we are at the time of implementation. And so this is where I am now as a minister, to handle some of these issues and then take it back to Mr. President's table. So it is not insurmountable, many of the problems that I have seen, but many of them also require dialogue and also patience for people, especially the economic downturn is everywhere in the world. It's not only peculiar to Nigeria. And also the fact that before we came into office, there was this arguments here and there about what will happen to subsidy, So the subsidy was handled by Mr. President headlong. Now, how to manage the effect of subsidy. So I will see that yes, it's a tax, but definitely if we have to succeed And under the renewed hope, we must handle it also carefully.
Okay, thank you, Your Excellency. Sir, you are most suitable for this job, considering the present setting, in Nigeria, from what you have represented. So Nigerians will be expecting, much from you in this direction. I know that when you took office, when assumed duty, you and your deputy were briefed by the various departments,
Yes.
or directorates, if you like, of the ministry. And so you have a better understanding of the specific items involved in this. We have had perennial disputes, labor disputes with government over the years. And some of them have even become recurring decimal. These are issues that would have been tackled years back, but always put forward, postponing the evils there. So can we learn more about the specific areas that these departments have highlighted to you that perhaps form the basics for your first entry in terms of preferring solution to the teeming, challenges confronting labor as against the, government policies and what have you. So what are those areas that are thematic in your consideration?
Well, at the ministry, we have to deal with so many issues. But paramount among those issues is, first of all, the concern about wage increase, the concern about also the insurance about the hazards during the work period. And so at the Ministry of Labor and Employment, you have departments dealing with this. So for me, when I came on board, before then I saw the president was also meeting with them. There was a meeting I saw every time the labor was running to the villa, and then they would come out. So I assumed that a lot of issues were discussed. Now we came in, and what we did was to start getting the brief from each of the departments. There is a Department on Employment, ND. There is also the NSITF, which is insurance body, taking care of welfare and hazards during work period. And then we are also going to be dealing with wage increase, because after this is almost getting to 5 years, and the rule says after 5 years there must be a the wage increase. So all of this I collected, and we are now doing a briefing in respect to how do we handle some of these issues. Now, when you see people talking about strike, I was also wondering, because at the time that I had almost concluded briefing, because you don't need to just go and engage people without knowing what was there. So I was also doing my briefing with all the departments, and then all of a sudden what I saw was a notice of strike. And throughout that period of notice of strike, within 2 days I saw notice of strike. Although I have not received the letter, I must confess up to this time, we have not seen the letter in my ministry. So when they did that, I said, let them come. Let the labor come. Let's discuss, because I am there for discussion. I said, let's have opportunity to discuss. Unfortunately, yes, they didn't come. And then one of the arms of the Labor Congress came, that is the TUC. So what TUC presented to me was exactly what Labor was presenting. Now, with a lot of grievances, yes, about the mode of distribution of palliatives to the various states without setting committees, proper committees to manage that. There was also the crisis within some unions in some states, and then the National Union of Road Transport Workers issue. I think last among them was the issue of wage award and wage increase. I don't want to talk about wage increase because that should happen by next year. But then the wage award for workers, if we are doing it for states, what are we doing for the federal workers? So those were issues that we took cognizance of, and so we were now preparing to go and handle them. So you don't start handling it without the dialogue. That was why I called them. I said, let's have a meeting. Finish the meeting. Then I can pick out some of those things that require immediate attention. And then the ones that are going to be long-term preparations, we'll be handling it with them. Like I said, this is not my first time of being in the labor. I was also, I will say, a comrade, because I was a secretary of the Nigerian Bar Association. So I'm qualified to be called a comrade. So I'm prepared to, I must be called, I will say that yes, I'm a comrade. Oh, I don't know whether they will say I'm not one.
It's doubtful. It's doubtful, Honorable Minister, that you will be admitted as a comrade. But I'd like to draw your attention to a policy dialogue that was held last year under the auspices of the Michael Imodu Institute for Labor Studies. And incidentally, one of our guests, Wale Smart, who is the DG of NECA, was one of the resource persons at that policy dialogue, framed around the question of compensation crisis in the workplace, which is symptomatic now of when you see prolonged industrial disputes, the wage awards you were talking about, work stoppages, disruption of employers' projections, and so on and so forth. And the bottom line is, I hope you do get a briefing, or you have already received a briefing with respect to the conclusions of that policy dialogue, to say that what we are dealing with today in Nigeria is a compensation crisis, ease of work, ease of living, and so on and so forth. From a philosophical point of view, how is this likely to impact on the delivery of the mandate of your ministry?
Very well, because you know, we mentioned, Mr. President said something. He said the withdrawal of subsidy will also go along with some of the pros and the cons, And he said, let Nigerians be patient, a little patience, because it is not a good period, but with patience, by the time they are doing the implementation of the subsidy palliatives, people will now know that, yes, there was a good reason, sufficient reason for abolishing the subsidy. So this is what we are saying. Many of these issues that you mentioned, I had a briefing by the ND, I had a briefing by the Michael Imodu Center, and then the briefing by the national, I mentioned the national, the NSITF, which are concerned about issue of compensation. It's a very huge, big department. That's the biggest department in agency, I must say, in the Ministry of Labor and Employment. What is the focus of labor and employment? It's first of all to be sure that the welfare of workers are adequately handled. Now, when we say welfare adequately handled, we are not saying that in any environment you cannot you can't avoid strike, because sometimes it's also part of the law to say that when you declare trade dispute is because there is no understanding or no consensus. So what we are doing, definitely, like I said, the focus of the ministry is to be sure that Nigerian workers are also smiling, within the period of this hardship, period of these problems in the economy. So from different departments, we have done our briefing. I finished the briefing just this week, Monday. I finished the briefing this Monday, and I saw that, yes, there is a huge concern, but definitely not insurmountable, with Mr. President and the new Renewed Hope agenda. Because in the Renewed Hope agenda, the emphasis is on how do we take out a lot of our people who are on the street. Because everywhere we turn them out, where there are no employment for people. And would focus on skill acquisition. Don't wear the days. When at the time you graduate from university, the best thing we are looking for is a white-collar job. This government has said the white-collar jobs are not available, but there are also options, and these options are skill acquisition. By skill acquisition, you become self-sufficient. You will also employ people when you have your skills. instead of always depending on white collar job, depending on white collar jobs. And this had to do with a lot of focus on how to engage the youth, how to engage the vulnerable in society. The vulnerable, now you talk about women, we talk about people with disabilities, you talk about people who are old, who are also seen as vulnerable. I'm not talking about us here, because I won't say we're old, but people who are old, who are disadvantaged. Now, when you are talking about people who are advantaged, you also the most concern must first of all start with people who are disadvantaged. I say disadvantaged because the youth will be disadvantaged. A young man graduates from university, his hope is to go and work somewhere, and you find him working with certificate without work. What work? So he is disabled. Or the disability side, different kind of disabilities. Anyway, I was talking when somebody came to me, I think the executive secretary of the Disability Rights Commission came to me and said, I asked him, who are your categories of disabled? He said, anybody who is also 70 years and above is disabled. is disabled. So it means that if you look at it as a package, the number of people who are disabled are so many. So that responsibility of having a focus are all contained in our manifesto. So it is now time for implementation. So I am also saying that people should be patient. Let us start the implementation. Give us time, let's start the implementation so that you now see whether we're doing it properly or we're not doing it properly.
All right, sir. I like the disability classification that you gave. So if you are out of school and you don't have a job, it's a kind of a disability. I quite agree with you, and many Nigerians will as well. You know, when you talked about being employable, that also had to do with a school curriculum, you know, that perhaps did not inculcate the idea of skills acquisition right from primary school level. Now, let me bring in the DG of NECA, or Ojerinde. You know, unemployment has been the bane of our national development in all sectors, if you ask me. And part of the problem in Nigeria is basically or majorly unemployment of the younger generation of Nigerians. And when I watch American politics, you know, when presidents of America on monthly basis or quarterly basis, as the case may be, rating how employment is, gravitating in the country, whether it's low or high, on monthly basis, I think so. To say, look, this is how well I've done in terms of employing Americans. That, tickles me, because for him to be on checking, that means it's a big deal to have people employed in any economy. Now, let's have your view about this unemployment issue in Nigeria, the level it is, what you are getting as a consultant in this area. What are you getting from the different ramifications, of employment in this country?
Thank you very much for having us once again, and congrats to the General Minister again for this wonderful privilege to lead probably the most important ministry in the country, Ministry of Labour and Employment. Coming to the question, the context of this unemployment issue, for us as the employer's body, it's a matter of cause and effect, because we cannot take out that issue from the macroeconomy. It's a function of, or it's more of the effect of what is happening globally or what's happening within the context of our nation. If the economy is booming, if the economy is progressing, in a trajectory of growth, then it naturally creates an environment for organized businesses to remain sustainable and then to thrive. The more organized businesses are growing, then the more their capacity and potential to generate jobs. Now, if on the flip side, there are issues with growth as regards the private sector, then it will also impact on the ability of that same private sector to create employment and also to get the mass of Nigerian youth that are coming out of the universities engaged. So we can't rule out the context of the whole economy in it. Now, the private sector has been adjudged, rightly so, as the biggest creator of jobs. You know, out of every 10 jobs in the world, the private sector creates at least 8 of those jobs. And if the private sector is struggling to survive, then it also impacts the level of jobs that will be created. And that's why we are glad when we saw the 8-point agenda, and job creation was one of those 8-point agendas. So for us to fix it, beyond fixing the supply side, which is the university system, and you rightly mentioned the curriculum of the university, beyond fixing the supply side, which is the university, looking at the curriculum to say, is the curriculum, is it fitting into the need of the industry? The courses that we are currently running at the university, are they speaking to the industrial perspective, the industrial trajectory of the country in 5-10 years? We were supposed to have a meeting with the Minister of Education this morning by 10. Unfortunately, we are not going to have that meeting. So the concern is this: if you don't fix the educational system and you keep churning out graduates, you know, the supply will be upscaling, but there will not be spaces for those that you are supplying to be uptaked by the industry. Now, if the industry is struggling, is stuttering, then there is also no potential for them to expand in order to take the supply. That's the second part. And the third part for us is this, and the Honourable Minister has mentioned it, the issue of technical and vocational skills. And what we have advocated is the issue of the dual model that is predominant in Germany, in Canada, in France, where graduates or students, as they are going to school, they are also learning one skill or the other. So progressively, at a point you choose as a graduate, do I want to go for the white-collar job, or do I want to stay with the skill that I have acquired? So for us, it's a multidimensional approach that government needs to take. And we have a model, basically, that we have run with the Industrial Training Fund, and it's still running. It's a technical and vocational skill project that's run for almost 10 years, and we have thousands and thousands of graduates have been trained. And we're proud to say 98% of those graduates, immediately they finish their training, their technical skill training, 98% are off-takes by the industry. About 2% are those that desire to start their own business. I think that is the model that we should employ in order to deal with this issue of unemployment. It's a big problem for us. And in Nigeria, with the large number of the population of youths that we have currently, I think we have to approach those issues in that multidimensional area so that we don't run ourselves into crisis.
All right, Wale Smart, thank you very much there for the points that you have raised. I want to bring in now Comrade Peter Esele, the former president of the Trade Union Congress. I earlier asked the Honorable Minister the question with respect to the issues around frequent trade disputes, which have been framed as part of the compensation crisis. I know that there is the workmen's compensation, injuries and so on and so forth. There, we talk compensation here is a synonym for reward for work. And so you find today ASU is on strike. They are not on strike at the moment, let's say that. As they are ending, they ask NASU is picking up. As NASU is ending, SANO is picking up. As those ones are ending, polytechnics are picking up, colleges of education are picking up. Resident doctors, they have theirs, Johesu will pick theirs, and then all kinds of things. And there is a contention that our focus should rather be on the broader plate of how to fix the compensation crisis in our labor industry.
Yes, well, thank you for having me. One thing is very clear is that if we want to handle a lot of these strikes, you have to have an omnibus plan, not just cherry picking. So once you do that cherry pick, that is where we have all of these challenges. We need to have an agreement to say, okay, if I'm dealing with, for example, workers in NTA, and I'm dealing with workers in VON, Voice of Nigeria, what I need to do is to say, okay, fine, at a particular time of the year, we all agree. At a particular time of the year, we'll sit down and look at our compensation, and then you look at the challenges that these workers are facing, and then you provide a solution. So once you are able to do that, you find out that gradually the system will not be heated. And this issue of perennial strike, why are these strikes? One, when you have employers who don't keep to the terms of collective bargaining agreement. Two, you also have employers who are not transparent. Then three, you also have poor relationship, poor communication skill from employers. And then the other aspect of it is also, when I talk about relationship, how do you build a relationship? Take, for example, I'll give an example of, I was discussing with the DG NECA. Many years ago, I had an issue, one of these IOCs have a problem, and then the workers wanted to go on strike. But there is a direct line between the director of HRO and the secretariat of Pengassan. So you use that informal communication skill. We also now come to fore to say, okay, fine, this is what we are planning to do. And then you are able to feel the grievances of the employees. That way you will have the issue of perennial strikes. We also be nipping the bud. Another aspect was, in time past, when I always talk about her, Dr. Agari was permanent secretary in the Federal Ministry of Labour. When we are doing a National Executive Council meeting, you are stepping out of the meeting, your phone is buzzing, it's Mrs. Agari on the line, and you start wondering, how is she knowing what we have just discussed? Which means she also had somebody inside of our meeting that is giving her that. And then when I'm dealing with her, the first thing I know is that if Dr. Agari will tell you, if she tells you it's 7 a.m., you don't need to look at the time. So if I'm going to meet Dr. Agari, I must make sure that I'm coming with all the facts and everything I needed. And I know that she will be very dispassionate and follow the law in passing her judgment. Therefore, it becomes easier for me to interact with her and for us to also avert strike. Now, let's look at the issue of what is currently playing out now between government and organized labor. Subsidy has been removed. One of the things I've seen in this government, which I always say, you are growing when you are making new mistakes. People always say, don't make mistakes. No, if you don't make mistakes, you are not growing. But always make new mistakes. Don't make the mistake of the past. If you keep repeating the mistake of the past, then you are insane. That is how you define insanity, when you keep repeating the same mistake. But this government is making new mistakes, which is an evidence of growth. But the other aspect I expect them to do is when I talk about the omnibus plan. In June, the federal, state, and local government shared 785 billion from the federation account. In July, the federal, state, and local government shared 1.9 trillion. Now, subsidy has been taken away. That is why they are making so much money. Now, the Naira has been devalued. The optic of Naira devaluation is that the federal, state, and local government will get more money. The downside of Naira devaluation is that your purchasing power of your 30,000 minimum wage is equivalent to about 18,000 Naira. What we now need to ask is, what is the government doing with the money? So when government says palliatives, I see palliatives as being very, very insulting. I think I prefer to use the word intervention. Because palliative is a treatment that has no cure. You just come, it's like a band-aid. You give somebody a bag of rice. How long will it last? Even in my house, we are a family of 6. My wife and I and 4 children. A bag of rice will not go beyond the month. So if you are giving me a bag of rice, I'm not talking about myself. You are giving somebody a bag of rice. The maximum, if they are doing Sunday rice, maximum you can have is 8 weeks. But if you are doing 2 times or 3 times rice, the maximum is 4 weeks. So what now happens when the bag of rice is exhausted? So that is a challenge. So what we now need to look at is what will affect everybody. We are talking about organized labor. Organized labor is less than 5%. I don't think they're even up to 10% of people who are employed. So if your attention is on organized labor, you are actually treating, it's like using Panadol to treat cancer. So you now need to look at what will affect every Nigerian. It's transportation. If you look at the workers, basically you spend about 60 to 70% right now of your monthly earnings on transport system. So what do you need to do? Is your intervention should be in that area of transportation, which will be beneficial to everybody. Intervention be in the area of healthcare, which is also going to be beneficial to everybody, not just NLC, TUC, because most times that's where government talks about. Education, beneficial to everyone. That is an area I think government can put their attention, and then you gradually start seeing that this intervention goes on and there will be less strike. And then attention should also be on what the state government are doing with the money. Because the revenue going to the state right now is 2.5 more, 2 times more. And the revenue going to the local government is also 2 times more. So we need to, that's why I use the word omnibus plan, whereby the federal, the state, and the local government now sit down and say, okay, X amount of money, state will say we are contributing X amount of money, and the federal government comes with counterpart funding. Transportation, for me, is one area I think you can ameliorate whatever hardship Nigeria is facing currently.
Yeah, thank you indeed, Comrade Sel. It's good listening to you once more, because when you were in the saddle, you are doing a lot more. I appreciate it. It's good to see you, really. In fact, the omnibus plan that you pontificated a while ago is a clear indication that we have to face our challenges from all fronts. Yes, engage all the gears, and that's the only way to go. Because I believe that we have allowed certain issues to deteriorate, to a certain point where we begin to now, become a fire brigade approach that we are using. You talked a lot that I'd like the Honorable Minister to really touch on, because this is an experienced man when it comes to labor. Little we did back in the days, it's not good enough to begin to compare what's happening at the national level. The omnibus plan is to talk about transportation, something that will be pervasive. Everybody will benefit from that, and a lot of other things that he said. Palliative should not be the right word. That's what he said. That look, if it's palliative, then you are scratching, the challenge, because it's going to, when the palliative is over, the issue persists. But in terms of intervention, you may, as a matter of fact, address the issue and deal with it adequately. Now, what are your intentions? Because I want to believe, quite frankly, Honorable Minister, that you are still learning a little bit. I mean, at the national level, even though you have an experience as a governor, have dealt with the labor and had meetings with labor at the national level and what have you. But now you are in the nitty-gritty of dealing with labor. And there are labor, as according to Mr. Sele, who are not necessarily NLC, TUC, and what have you. Perhaps it's so pervasive that it touches all sectors of our national life. What are the things that Nigerians will begin to hear from you in terms of implementation, the new hope? What are these hopes now? I want you to talk to Nigerians and look the hopes in terms of alleviating poverty, or in terms of the omnibus plan he talked about. What is applicable in your work plan?
Well, thank you very much. I earlier mentioned that first we have this. We have our mindset or preparation is towards some of the younger ones and also the disabled ones within the society. Now, you mentioned transportation. Transportation was one of the items that was given to us immediately. But what I'm saying is that all those things are plans already on ground. Now, waiting for implementation. My quarrel with the labor at that time was, you have given us this. You had a meeting with Mr. President, and Mr. President, some of the issues at that time was not the ones that Mr. President will take himself immediately. Mr. President will require a cabinet. Now the cabinet was not in place because some of the items are supposed to be handled by the various ministries. Because like you mentioned, our role is not to be handling crisis. It's not the issue of, let it not be seen that labor and employment is, the crisis is coming from that ministry. Our responsibility is to handle crisis from every other ministry. If there are crises, if there are conflicts, especially on labor matters, on labor matters. Somebody asked one day, he said, why is it that your ministry? It's always strike. I said, not my ministry. The strikes are not from my ministry. Our duty is to look at where there are crises, especially on respect to welfare of workers. So these crises, conflict, emanate from different ministries, but the headquarters for settlement. So we now serve as Supreme Court to deal with those issues. So transportation was one of them. I saw in that place, part of the discussion was that there must be this provision of CNG vehicles, provision of CNG vehicles all over the country so that it will ease transportation of people. All these are programs that are already I already set out. So the quarrel, now talking about even the last notice, the quarrel was that it's taking too long. I asked them, I said, what is too long? I came in this office. It's not 1 week. It's not up to 1 week I came in. And you are saying it's too long. Give me a little time. Let me study what is happening. Let me get collection of them. If some of them requires that we go back to the president, we'll go back. If others are not necessary to go back to the president, we will start implementation immediately. And even after that, that was when the idea of getting something immediately to cushion the effect of the hardship. We mentioned the issue of palliative, whether you call it
intervention,
palliative or intervention. All I think to me is a question of grammar, but it's the same thing. It means the same thing. We must do some intervention while we are planning for big things to come. So transportation is one of the items that we are focusing on. I told you that you are talking about the CNG vehicles. You are talking about opportunities in all the states to create that, to create that kind of let me use this word, intervention, so that people will not think that this is the same government, because I know we must create that kind of trust with the labor, and that is what we are doing. I'm not saying that we've concluded on all these things, but already we are already talking with the labor on some of these items. Let them give us a little time and see whether we are going to start doing that or not, because definitely the effect, Mr. President is also aware of the effect of the withdrawal of subsidy. You cannot say, I'm withdrawing subsidy. And he's always asking, he said, be patient with me. I am withdrawing subsidy, and you will see the advantages of the withdrawal of the subsidy. So that is what we are doing. I don't want to say we are calling everything today, or we are going to handle everything within 1 year. But as for plans that we have on ground, I also have a lot of joy in my heart that I am in that ministry.
So, what plans do you have for ASU? Have you thought? Has the thought come across your mind? You know, as to say, look, this is a group of Nigerians that are historically known to, you know, to fight with government. It's been perennial, and I'm wondering, I don't want it to happen again, because it's affecting the generality of our people, especially the younger ones who are in school. Is there any master plan to finally deal with ASU issue, so we don't hear ASU strike anymore?
Well, just Honorable Minister, while that question is on the table, I would like you to also take it along with a proposition by Comrade Peter Esele that it is probably advisable to have an omnibus approach rather than atomistic. You know, you take any sector, you deal with them, justice, health, and then strikes keep coming up and up, you know, and so frequently. So take it along. It says ASU, but Comrade Peter Esele says, look, have an omnibus plan, have, you know, a helicopter view of the industrial crisis and how to address it.
Well, we're not only talking of ASU. Now, I said it here that when you talk about plans for workers, the plans is not always coming. It's not necessarily from the labor and employment. The labor and employment will lay out a plan, but those plans are implemented by the various ministries. Now you talk about ASU. ASU is under Federal Ministry of Education. It's under Federal Ministry of Education. I'm sure the minister has been here. He has not come. Yes, so I'll put that, I'll say that you wait, invite the minister to come. Because I will not answer whatever is in all the ministries as it is now. That is not my responsibility. But my responsibility is when there is no implementation and there is a conflict, then they'll bring it back to me. But some of these issues that you mentioned are already issues that are dealt with at ministerial level. You can see a lot of ministries running up and down. We had the issue of not only ASU, but also the strike by doctors, that by resident doctors. Something like that, we watch what they are doing. at the Federal Ministry of Health. It is when they reach a conflict, then they come back to us to settle that conflict. But you can see immediately after the swearing in, all the ministries, all the ministers have moved in, moved in to take actions in so many places. You see them moving to different states. You see them watching and supervising all the ministry. So if you put all this together, you will know that we're hitting the ground running. So my responsibility, when you ask about ASU, I will also ask education to come and brief me. What is the responsibility? So this is what we have done. Thank God we just finished our briefing last week. We finished our briefing last week. It is now implementation, and some of those implementations are our responsibilities to go around to check all over the ministries where they are doing the implementation, whether they are doing it correctly, that will get into a conflict, or whether it will not get into conflict.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Minister. But just a reminder that on Good Morning Nigeria, some weeks ago, we had a two-part conversation on the conversion of vehicles to gas, that's to say from fossil fuel to gas. And the chairman of what was called the Nigerian Gas Expansion Program did say, because he was our guest on those two occasions, that the infrastructure for CNG would take a much longer time to achieve in different parts of the country versus the use of LPG. So the recommendation was use LPG, that gas existing filling stations can readily convert to LPG, because here on Good Morning Nigeria, we also engaged the previous administration, and they said they were setting up CNG plants. I think there was one somewhere in Jabi, but hardly ever could get beyond a few. Well, it didn't gain traction. That's the way to put it. So I think the point is just to note again, because I've been hearing CNG buses. They are warning, that's the expert now of the gas expansion program, to say infrastructure that you can readily convert will be more with respect to LPG, that is liquefied petroleum gas, and just some small variations between LPG and CNG. But which brings me the issue of transportation back to Wale Smart and, of course, Comrade Peter Esele. Somebody talked also about education, and then Comrade Peter Esele was talking about feeding and so on and so forth. Again, when you look at all of this, you can frame it around ease of living for workers. Ease of living. How do we ease up the hardship of Nigerian workers? I think that's a critical issue. And what would be your recommendation as one, an employer's perspective, and also speaking to government on matters to consider?
Thank you once again. If you permit me just for a minute before I come to the question, on the context of this omnibus engagement, I think for us, being proactive, an organization that is proactive, we had also come up with a policy recommendation also that we'll be sharing with the Minister of Labour on our view, through our advocacy think tank, on the things that we think the ministry should focus on in the short term, in the medium term, and in the long term. And as I said, if we don't deal with those issues, we don't deal with a review, an holistic review of our industrial relations system, then we'll be building structures on nothing. Because now the arbitrariness, the proliferation of strike, which is also a symptom of a deeper issue, if we don't deal with those issues, this fundamental issue of our industrial relations system, then we'll be building a very strong building on a very shaky foundation. And the ministry the process of the review of that policy was ongoing. I think we are part of that review, and we just hope the Honourable Minister will also note so that we can quickly fast track that, and also the issue of the labour laws that has also witnessed a bit of delay. Those are key issues for us. Now, the issue of the survival, ease of living for workers. We cannot divorce the context of the ease of living from the context of ease of doing business. They come pari passu. If the is an issue of the bed and the rope. If the rope is not standing firm, the bed perching on it will not also be comfortable, because it will be angling whether it will fall or not. So we need to deal with it concurrently, issue of ease of doing business and also ease of living. If the business is doing well, then there is a high chance that the employees within its fold, employees which are also fundamental to its survival, will also be doing well. If the business is not sustainable, then there is a very high chance that it will also affect the employees as a whole. So for us, it still come back to government to create an environment that is hospitable for businesses to thrive. And then if the business is thriving, then we now come up to the issue of the social dialogue, an environment where employers create that environment where workers can also contribute, where workers can engage. It gladdens our heart when Comrade Esele mentioned it. Initially it started with employers that are doing this, employers that are doing that, and I was happy when he zeroed it back to the context of he actually had the meeting with employers, and when it was in Pengas, and a lot of things were achieved. And those are the things we preach in NECA, in responsible enterprises. That whatever you do, you must be responsible as an employer to your stakeholders, which are employees. You must be responsible to government in context of your taxes and regulatory compliances, and also responsible to your stakeholders, which is the community. For us, ease of living is fundamental. And it's also interests you that the conversation about living wage is also gaining ground at the high level. And what we are currently waiting for is a framework that will actually define what's the context of living wage. What we have now is the context of minimum wage, which the world is currently implementing. And I can tell you for free that the conversation on living wage has reached an advanced level. But we need a framework so that the definition of living wage is the same in Nigeria, is the same in Ghana, is the same in all parts of the world.
In just a line or two before we proceed on the break, happily you say you have a policy document that from NECA to the Honorable Minister. What do you find as the major challenge with our current industrial relations practice that you are recommending for overhaul?
First is the issue of the need for us to deepen social dialogue. Now, we tend to speak to ourselves rather than speak to each other. Or we tend to speak to each other rather than speak with each other. So you are speaking, and the other person, you are speaking you are listening to respond. They are not listening to understand.
Okay, all right. So, thank you. You may have to explain that further when we come back from this break. And I'm going to raise other issues. So actually, with Comrade Esele, and these are going to be issues concerning labor itself and their internal crisis, and of course the process of selection or election, if you like. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on NTA. Yes, thank you for staying with us up to this moment. Still, Good Morning Nigeria, and we're discussing renewed hope agenda and the task before the Minister of Labour and Employment. We're actually in the nitty-gritty of this conversation, and I want to bring in once more Comrade Esele to explain certain things to me, as well as Nigerians who may wish to know. Let's know that the fact that there is a need for a review of industrial relations in Nigeria. But let us be particular about the labor unions themselves and their own internal issues, process of recruitment and what have you. Just 2 days ago in Abuja here, about 2 people were killed when members of the National Union of Road Transport Workers, had issue around Gariki 2. That's just to mention the most recent one. We've also had issues of elections. The NBA election is like a national election in Nigeria. Nigeria Medical Association election is the same thing. NUJ, the same thing. TUC, NLC is like a battle, most of the time if you're doing elections and what have you. And these are people who are seeking to serve. And if you're seeking to serve, why put in all the energy, to force yourself into the place? And when, elections are over, you now have internal crises. And that also reflects on the way you negotiate with government on certain issues, because the character of the personnel heading NLC will also determine the direction of the association. So what do you have to say about internal mechanisms in the labor sector?
Yes, let me start from the previous question before we went on break. You talk about ease of living. Now, what a lot of us don't know when we are talking about fighting corruption is that corruption in the system is as a result of difficulty in living. You can see somebody who is worth over 100 million and he still wants to steal because he lives in an environment that is uncertain. He's not sure of tomorrow. So when you make your environment uncertain and unlivable, so what now happens is that everybody wants to grab because they are thinking of tomorrow, I'm not sure of tomorrow. Now, I worked for a company. I will give up my life for that company because the company took care of me. And then I will now gravitate to your why labor is the way it is, about the way we... I worked in the private sector. We're taken care of in the private sector. So how did I become Pengassim president? For you to be a Pengassim president, you must be a staff of an oil company. Now, and then it took about a week to convince me to want to run because I was looking at what I was earning. So why do I need to put another line to come and serve? So I decided to serve. So when you now decide that you are going to serve, why should I kill myself because I want to serve? It is because you have pecuniary interest. That is why you will want to kill yourself to serve. We used to have this saying, if we win an election, do thanksgiving. If you lose an election in Pengassim, we say do thanksgiving. Because if you want to serve and they ask you not to serve, you'll be very happy to go home because you are going to have sleepless night. I saw the current president of Pengassim and TUC last night. I know his age, he's graying already. I know his age. So now when you have all of that, it now has to do with the content and the character of the people. The content and the character of people, that's why somebody will carry a gun and go and kill in labor union. Why? Because there's so much money to be made now. You are talking about National Union of Road Transport Workers. Do you know the average of people who collect money from Keke Napep and coal? So that's an avenue for them to make money. And they are looking at Nigerian Bar Association. The last election, through their neck meeting, I was embarrassed when I was hearing what the president and the secretary were saying. These are the cream de la cream of our country. So whether you say NSC, whether you say TUC, whether you say National Union of Road Transport Workers, whether it's NBA, they are Nigerians. They did not fall from the sky. So what is happening in all of these institutions is a reflection of the content and character of the people. So if you want to have, you don't expect to plant, apologies to Majek Fashek, you don't expect to plant yam and expect to reap cassava. This is our value. For a society to grow, you need to have a culture. When I talk about culture, what comes to a lot of people's mind is people wearing skimpy dress and dancing jazzco. No. The culture is your tradition. What do you live by? What can you be? You look at a German now, we know, if you meet a German, you know, of course, quality. You meet a Japanese, you know, hard work. They are driven by that. So what is our culture? If our culture is service for the sake of service, and you see there are crises brewing, you walk away. But when there are so many things to be made, so many influence that may have arisen, and the politicians are also using the unions too. I don't want to mention some of these unions' names that we know that the politicians will go to when it's close to election, they now become the militant wing of whatever political party. So one of the things that we must do to make our country saner, nobody says there are no conflict. There will always be conflict. The Ministry of Labour that we're talking about, why don't we have labor desk in every ministry? That is even more effective. And then the labor desk in every ministry reports to the minister, oh, now ASU is coming. That's also part of the omnibus plan. ASU is coming. The person in the labor desk tell the minister, this is the current challenge going on, and this is where it's coming. And then the minister can call his colleague at the Federal Executive Council meeting or anywhere and say, this is what they think, this is how best to handle it. So we should not be, I always look at, I'm a very optimistic person. And I don't always like to look at symptoms. Let's look at the causes of our challenges. And the causes of our challenges is that our value system is very, very weak. And we are not making things easier for the younger generation to know how best to do things.
Thank you very much, Comrade Peter. So, Honorable Minister, I'd like you to respond to the proposal by the two other guests, more particularly having labor officers, because it was an issue that came up in one of our conversations on Good Morning Nigeria sometime in the past, that there used to be labor desks in the various ministries, but somehow they fell into abeyance I'm sure the various ministries, they have Servicom desks, they have ROIOs, that's Resident Information Officers posted from Ministry of Information. They also have procurement desks. So, but the labor desks appear to be in abeyance. Is this something that you want to consider in terms of revival? And more also, particularly with respect to training. It's been said, it was one of the guests, I've been struggling to remember his name. He was a labor leader, and then he went to the House of Reps. I'm sure probably you know his name. It was said on Good Morning Nigeria that when the unions get into negotiations with some government officials, that the gap in negotiation skills is extensive. And so that speaks to the need for better labor negotiation training skills for labor officers wherever they might be across the MDAs. Are these matters you may wish to consider?
Let me say that we have, but not enough. These are some of the proposals, because when I came to the ministry, I realized that there were a lot of proposals that were not implemented in the last administration. For every part of many of the ministries, we have labor officers who are reporting to us. But I won't say that they are enough, because when you start considering, you are not only talking of government, but you are talking about the formal and informal sectors at the private level. Now, if you have the number, and then you are thinking of what we have at the Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment, they are very, very insufficient. So we are also moving. And I thank God that you are making a plea on our behalf. I will say on behalf of the ministry. That's a proposal too we are taking to Mr. President. That because labor and employment should be #1 ministry. It should be #1 ministry. Because your focus will be on creating jobs and taking people off the street. So attention must be given to that labor ministry. But then, unfortunately, the number of people I saw when it was presented to me as labor officers is quite insufficient. They are not enough to take care of all these things. I agree with you that definitely for every ministry, every parastatal, and even the private sector, there must be that desk there, because it is the desk that will keep on informing us about what is happening. We will not even, in some cases, will not wait until it gets into a trade dispute or get into a situation where you are going to start addressing them, because by the time you come back to start addressing them, they would have gone on strike. They would have gone on strike already. So I want to assure you that it's part of our plan. It is already before the given to me, which I'm going to also send to Mr. President. But there are also so many of those things that I have seen. When I read some of the laws and some of the agreements, sometimes these agreements are also leading to amendments of our laws to go along with the current things, not only in Plateau, in Nigeria. You know, I just left Plateau. That's why.
It's understandable.
Not only in Nigeria, but all over, so that we start practicing them. I saw about 15 or 16 laws already with the Ministry of Justice. That was what I quickly went to the office of the Attorney General to tell him, I have seen a lot of laws, amendments, proposals in your office. I don't want that to be kept. Please do the amendment, send it to the National Assembly. If it is required, let us pass these laws so that we can also be moving with the current trends in the world. So
I'm sorry to interject. I know my colleague is itching. Let me also throw this in as part of probably what you have apprehended, not as a labor dispute. Your predecessor, Chris Ngige, and the Honorable Minister of Finance and the previous administration co-chaired a committee to review wage disparity across the public service, that there were said to be some dozen or more salary schemes for different kinds of persons, and that had been one of the sore issues in dealing with ease of living. Because people are complaining about palliatives, there are federal government workers who don't even know what we are talking about. Is this one of the issues that you have apprehended and may wish to push forward?
Very well. Very well. There are some of the amendments that were proposed to the Federal Ministry of Justice. So we're waiting for them. I'm not also sleeping. Okay. As a lawyer, I've also followed it I'm following up with the Federal Ministry of Justice, because there are some of them that we will need them. Because what we said is that we did, at the time, this issue of minimum wage, not only minimum wage, the issue of withdrawal of subsidy did not start today. It started even with the former administration. So by now, there are certain things that will also have to be improved in the laws concerning the welfare of workers. Some of them are outdated completely. So if you start using things that are 20 years on, today it is not 20 years. We want to carry things that, new things that will also follow with the current happenings in the country, and also compare it with what is happening all over.
All right, Your Excellency, we appreciate that. Well, my colleague mentioned your predecessor, Ngige. I'm not sure he had it easy, you know, with labor during his period. You know, I hope such scenario will not return. You know, with someone like you in the saddle. Well, let's move to here in there. Let me ask you this. You know, you Nigerian Employers Consultative. So that means you are in touch with employers in this country. What can be done for employers to expand their businesses, expand their horizon? What is obtainable elsewhere across the globe to say, look, now we're looking for employment. Let me empower a particular company that is into manufacturing, for instance, or into production, not an importer, right? To say, employ, let's give you this fund, right? Return them in 10 years or more to see that you expand your business and employ more people. I recall that when Obama came to power newly, there was a serious economic quagmire in America with respect to the manufacturing sector, which attracted some, well, not palliative intervention now. They have to try and lift big-time manufacturers, you know, like Ford and other big, you know. Now down here, can such be replicated with some selected number of businessmen, you know, or captains of industry to do this? To those who are into manufacturing, they can easily expand, having had the template for manufacturing process that could now begin to attract persons to come and work for them. Is it a possibility?
It's a very, very high possibility. And also to say, NECA is, we are not only in touch with employers, we are actually the body of employers. You know, we represent Nigerian employers at the ILO, represent them at the International Organization of Employers. So anywhere you're talking of Nigerian employers, the NECA represents that critical group. What does employer need? You know, basically, it's not. We don't need an arm and a leg, and it's also it's enlightening self-interest for government to do what you just mentioned, to focus on employers and ensure that that group actually remain not only competitive but first sustainable. Because when you are sustainable, that you can now start thinking of how do I remain competitive. And for employers, basically create, before coming to the issue of grants, you know, because even if you give grants today, you know, give me a grant of $1 billion to expand my business. If the regulatory environment is still hostile, if the legislative environment is still hostile, you know, we have an ongoing engagement with the National Assembly on their rights to carry out oversight functions on organized businesses, and every other time you see the National Assembly, one ad hoc committee or the other, inviting MDs of businesses to come to NAS for one investigative hearing or the other. Even when we have a case at the Supreme Court to adjudicate whether they have that right, you know, the House still continue to do that. You know, those are issues that creates challenges for organized businesses. So beyond the grants, beyond the credit facilities that you provide, I think it's much more important for you to create an environment that is conducive for businesses to thrive. It is important that we deal with the issue of taxation. Even if you give grants, you give loans, if you don't deal with the issue of multiplicity of taxation, as of today, we have over 60 different taxes that organized businesses are paying across the 3 tiers of government. No business survives that kind of onslaught. And we appreciate the president for inaugurating the Presidential Committee on Tax Reforms. So while the issue of, I don't want to call it palliative, Why the issue of intervention for organized businesses is very important. And the president mentioned it during his inaugural speech of supporting selected manufacturing businesses with over 75 billion. That is welcome. That is very important. And we wish more can be done. Okay. But while he's doing that, pardon me, we also need to fix the regulatory, the legislative environment, so that those don't create contradictions. You might give us money, but if those contradictions still exist, you will have created bottlenecks that will render to nullity those support that you are giving with money.
Well, Smart, I'm sorry, we're getting pressed for time. Comrade Peter Esele, very quickly. How concerning should the matter of labor migration be in the realization of the renewed hope agenda? Labor migration.
It should be taken very seriously, because the reason why you're having labor migration, there are people who want to go out there and live in an environment is because of the environment. Sometimes some people want good health care. They want not just the compensation alone. When you migrate, compensation is key. But you're also looking at living in an environment where you have security, an environment where you feel that your rights are respected. So if a worker knows that, okay, I'm not going to get paid at the end of the month, I need to struggle for what. Take, for example, a medical doctor in Nigeria. A medical doctor in Nigeria will earn less than 10% of what he's going to take if he goes to the UK. So the last minister said, oh, everybody, we have enough doctors, they can migrate. You and I know that that's not true. The last minister of Labour, we don't have enough doctors. So government should ensure that the environment is created to make it easier for the worker to do his work, have ease of living, and also to live in an environment where his security is guaranteed.
All right, Honorable Minister, your final thoughts on this, on your renewed hope agenda with respect to labor.
Well, my final talks will be still patience, because we've already put in a lot of things in order, and definitely with some of the comments I've received today, I will also go back to the office to the drawing board. But I want to assure Nigerians that what we have in the renewed hope agenda is for their own interest, and that interest is what Mr. President is pursuing. Today, you will see him. He just came back from India. He came from India, which was also not part of his schedule. He ran to Dubai. And when he got to Dubai and came back, he came with good news, because all the problems that we had with the UAE was solved within a few hours. Because that time there was restriction of movement, a visa problem with the UAE, which was also solved. Because I also saw, and I'm very happy, that when he came back from India, there is this move by very, very top businessmen from India to come and invest in Nigeria. Like we said, it is not always government that will be
all right,
employing people.
Honorable Minister, I know you have a lot to dish out to Nigerians, but as you said earlier on, it's time for implementation,
yes,
and we are waiting for that. Nigerians are believing that things are going to turn around, so that we can begin to breathe, have a new air, as it were.
Very well.
Dr. Simon Bako Lalong, CON, the Honorable Minister of Labour and Productivity, and former Governor of Plateau State, we thank you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Wallace Smart, the Director General of the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association. It's been a pleasure talking to you this morning, sir.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Comrade Peter Esele, former President, Trade Union Congress, TUC, and Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria, Pengasen. It's good to host you, really. See you for the first time, one-on-one. It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
All right.
So that's it for us on Good Morning Nigeria today. We thank you for tuning in. Tomorrow is another day, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, look after yourselves. I'm Kingsley Osadoko.
And I am Kieran Umayo. Do have a great day.